Hey, everybody. Welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. I am Cherie Burton, and this is a podcast for those who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. Today, we've got an interesting episode on this whole masculine, feminine energy thing. It's created a lot of buzz in the marketplace just around personal development circles, as well as just marketing, and it's everywhere. And a lot of times there are myths associated because it's not gender specific. You guys have heard me say that a lot. When I'm talking about the feminine, capital F, I am actually talking about the feminine as an energy and as an archetype that exists within men and women. The thing is, we're often in this inner struggle, trying to subconsciously balance and understand the masculine and feminine within. You could call it the yin and yang, these forces within us. And the whole point, as we'll talk about with my guest, Kevin Nahai, is to integrate them so they're not warring inside of you, fighting against each other. The whole point is to eventually surrender them to each other so that they're working together as a team. So we're seeing this play out in society as a whole, but it's happening within individuals. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. So my guest, Kevin Nahai, is an expert in a variety of areas, including relationships, self-esteem, anxiety, eating disorders, the subconscious mind. He had a really interesting experience when he was 19. He was suddenly diagnosed with an incurable disease of the stomach that caused him to be unable to eat. So he fell into a deep depression, became severely anorexic, down to 112 pounds, and eventually attempted to take his life one night in the winter of 2011. And he said that by the grace of God, he survived to tell the tale, but still spent most of his 20s suffering through crippling anxiety, toxic relationships, and complete lack of confidence. After 7+ years of deep therapy, coaching, and meditation, Kevin was able to transform his life, and he gives clear, practical guidance and actionable daily steps to be able to help people love themselves authentically first, and then understand the opposite sex and these masculine and feminine energies that affect how we communicate and how we manage our own energy and our stress levels. So I think you're really going to love this episode. You can find him on kevinnahai.com. That link is also in the show notes. And please follow us on Instagram, Cherie.Burton, as well as ask to join our private Facebook group, Women Seeking Wholeness. Lots of changes coming. I've been bursting at the seams to share. We're getting a facelift for this whole podcast, whole new strategy, whole new way of reaching people, whole new emphasis. I'm so excited about it. So stay tuned for more info on that as we get a little closer to rounding out the summer. There will be some exciting announcements. Until then, let's turn to my conversation with relationship, self-esteem, and subconscious mind coach, Kevin Nahai. Kevin, I love that I have a guy on my show. It's been a while.
Thank you, Cherie. Thanks for having me on. Yes, you were mentioning before we started recording that guys on your show are a novelty. So I'm very honored.
Not too many make the cut, and not too many approach me to be on the show. And so, I checked you out, and I was like, I think he gets this. I think he's in the same vibe that we're about. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I checked out your show too, and I did feel aligned with a lot of what you're saying and teaching. And, I think it's important that men develop the emotional sophistication to be able to speak women's language and vice versa.
Yeah.
And, one of the biggest problems that I see, one of the biggest impediments to progress, I think, between the sexes, whether it's professional or romantic or in the family dynamic, is that we're speaking different languages, and then we're so frustrated as to why the other person doesn't get it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you were willing to have me on and hear my perspective.
Well, absolutely. And, talking about communication, I know that's one of your areas of specialty. If we were just to climb underneath, what it is that actually impedes that connection or communication is misunderstanding. And you and I were just talking before we started recording about there's this misunderstood masculine. And then there's also this misunderstood feminine, because these are two buzzwords right now. Everyone's talking about masculine energy, feminine, yin yang, and all this starting to make a huge comeback because people are awakening to how these forces really have impacted us, both from a toxic perspective and a healthy perspective. So what do you feel like I mean, speaking as a man and speaking from, I know I was telling you I have 3 sons. And so I've seen some of what they've had to deal with. A couple of them are in their 20s, but I do have a 9-year-old son as well. And what they're having to navigate in the emotional landscape is it's a different dynamic. It's a different, a challenge, I would say, maybe than their sisters have to confront, because it's more stigmatized, and it's lesser accepted, I guess, in a peer situation. Right. I try to make that safe at home to express emotion for them, but when they get out into the world, it seems like it's not honored.
Right.
So how would you, as a man, and maybe bringing us into this misunderstood masculine, and then we'll talk about the misunderstood feminine as well.
Sure. So I think you're talking about 2 different phases of life. One of them is when you're a child and you are becoming socialized, and you're becoming cognizant of the social pressures and trying to navigate, what is the right way to fit in? How much should you express yourself? What should your self-expression consist of? Like a 9-year-old boy and a 29-year-old man are completely different. They're 2 completely different ball games in terms of their self-expression. And in terms of, how stigmatized they are to express their emotions and things like that. Mm-hmm. I generally try to stay away from the argument or the perspective that society, which is this big, nameless, faceless, scary hand, forces us to do or not do certain things. I understand that there are social pressures and social influences, right? And for example, that as a man, there is a pressure to be stoic and not to be emotional and things like that. But, when we're pointing out that that is something that exists in quote unquote society, there's absolutely nothing that we can do about it, because now we are dealing with a force that is so much greater than our individual control. What is in our individual control is the way, for example, that you raise your son and teach him that men are not emotionless creatures, and that you're providing that safe space for his self-expression. That is something that's within your control. And then when he gets to be my age, which is 29, right? Mm-hmm. How he chooses to express himself and whether or not he has the ability to communicate his emotions, that's really on him at that point. That's no longer because he learned certain things in school or in the home or whatever. At a certain point, everybody has to grow out of the influences, masculine or feminine, that they grew up within, and they have to take agency for their lives and for their own self-expression. So I think, obviously how that occurs when you're a kid and how that occurs when you're an adult are 2 very different things. But you're right that we throw around these buzzwords of masculine and feminine energy and the yin and the yang and the polarity, and they're very, very misunderstood. And I think they're often overused and, interchanged and things like that. And if we're really going to get down to brass tacks on what this means for an individual person's life, again, not on the societal level, because that's out of our control. Mm-hmm. But if we're going to talk about, what masculinity and femininity mean in our lives individually, then we have to be very clear about how we're defining those things.
Yeah. And I think what can get muddy is that every human individual has a different combination of those energies naturally.
Right.
And what one person may perceive as unhealthy is actually healthy for another. In the way, as long as it's not hurting someone else. So for instance, we could talk about the LGBTQ plus spectrum and how a lot of those groups have been marginalized because they might be assigned a certain gender, or or maybe somebody put that on them, but they actually resonate more with a different kind of energy. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's just a lot of confusion, and a lot of it goes back to those social pressures that you addressed. But I look at myself, and I can only speak from my own perspective. You know, I'm obviously a woman, I'm a mom. I noticed very early that I had a lot of masculine energy in terms of the way I think. I'm a very strategic thinker, and I love business. And I'm able to flip into like get to the bottom line, and in a way that could be perceived as very like guyish. I don't know, like a dude would do. I recognize it as it can go south really fast, where I can tend to go into this mode of doing without balancing the being. And I've noticed this about myself. I'm a very hard worker, and I run an international business, and I'm able to flow. Like, that's actually my happy place. It's more of a challenge for me to go into this feminine receiving mode and surrender and do all of these things to be able to fill myself up, so that I can do the masculine activities that I'm. So if I were to just if I think every human has a formula that's natural for them, I might be X amount in the yin, and I might be X amount percentage in the yang, but it's me.
So this is precisely why I'm so glad you said this. This is precisely why I said we have to get down to brass tacks about, what these things actually mean. You're a perfect example of what I always say, which is that masculinity does not equal male, and femininity does not equal female.
Correct.
Now, if we're talking about the majority of human females contain more feminine energy and more of a feminine spirit than a masculine one. And the majority of human males or men, depending, I want to be sensitive to the right terminology. The majority possess more of a masculine drive than they do possess certain feminine essence. However, that does not mean that we equate, or we should equate, masculinity with males all the time. And we do equate it all the time. And then we run into this issue of telling men that they should be more emotional or more feminine. But that's a problem, because sometimes if a man is stoic or if he's logical, it's not because he's a man. It's because he has a lot of masculine energy, right? It's like if I told you, Cherie, you should really be more in your feminine receiving mode at work. It wouldn't be right for me to tell you that, because that's not the way your brain operates, right? Now, if you're too much in that, maybe you want to turn it down a little bit, because maybe you need to know the right time and place to harness your masculinity and harness your femininity. But I think the first really important point for everybody to understand is that your gender is not directly correlated to your disposition. Every person is born with a certain disposition, a certain amount of masculine energy and a certain amount of female energy, regardless of their gender. And you're not running into trouble because you're a man or a woman. You're running into trouble when your energies are out of whack, when you have way too much of one and not enough of the other, or when you are using way too much of one and not harnessing the other, or you don't know the appropriate times to use one or the other. Right?
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
Making sense?
Yeah, well, absolutely. We talk a lot about those energies not being gender specific. I think one powerful truth I'm recently learning is, well, there's a couple, like the point is to integrate them so they're not fighting against each other. Because what we're seeing in society is what's happening within individuals. We don't know how to harness these energies in a way that is always healthy because of what we've been conditioned to believe about them, as you're saying. I recently heard a really deep teaching about they both have to surrender to each other.
Mm.
So typically we've seen, through our archetypes and the conditioning and stuff, that the male energy is the dominant energy and the female energy or the feminine energy is the submissive. Those are the traditional roles or things that are assigned to those. And there is some truth to that in the sense that those energies exist in us, but it's not that the feminine is submitting to the masculine energy as much as it is that the masculine is submitting to the feminine energy. When they both surrender to each other and stop warring against each other, and there's not this inner wrestle, that's when they integrate. And that's when you can really be yourself.
Right. The problem with the word submissive is that it implies submitting to someone.
Yeah, I didn't mean it in that context.
No. I understand exactly.
Like, it's more like surrender. Like, I'm not going to fight you anymore. I'm going to allow what you came to teach me, and let's do this together, kind of a thing.
I agree with you 100%. What I'm pointing out is we say that the mask, so, dominant, strong, laser focused, those are all good descriptors for masculine energy. Submissive is a bad descriptor for feminine energy.
Yeah.
Because
she really is not necessarily just all about,
Right. It implies that submissive, if we can take out submissive to and just submissive, then it's a good description, right? Because submissive means you're receiving, you're supporting, and you are surrendering. Those are good descriptors. But we associate submissive with being submitting to someone else, as in being controlled by someone else, or just like being a demure, like docile little girl who has no opinions.
Right.
And that, again,
like a subordinate.
Right. And this is why these terms are so misunderstood.
Right.
Right. I think that the majority of women, I'm not one, so I don't want to speak for them, but
But you said you work with a lot of women and you were raised by women, and like you've always been around women.
Right. I understand them really well. And I think that the majority of women, they don't want to submit to someone or be controlled by someone, but they do enjoy being in the supportive role, at least in their relationships, right? At work is something else. They do enjoy being in a supportive role. They don't want to have to take the lead on everything. They do enjoy.
We want to be taken care of. We want to feel like someone is protecting us. There's very much something to that. Yeah.
Right. So,
especially right after you have a baby, I will say that's the most vulnerable place you can be. Your body is weak. You have this newborn and you literally need protection.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that most people who have masculine drive, they want to protect. They want to provide. That's in their DNA. It's in their soul. Now, the interesting thing about this is that could be a woman.
Yeah.
I know plenty of women who are the breadwinners and their husbands are stay-at-home parents. I've seen gay relationships, 2 gay men. One of them is completely masculine. The other one's completely feminine. The gender, of the person is not actually the determinant. It's their psychological and emotional disposition that you're sort of born with. So it's fascinating actually to see, a very girly girl who is more masculine than like my grandpa. And,
I think that's kind of like me. I really think I'm that person that you're just
okay.
I mean, I did pageants, I had a pageant title. I'm super girly that way.
Yeah.
But give me a task. I have to have tasks.
Yeah.
And I'm really intrigued with what you were telling me off air about these high-powered lawyers, female lawyers that you gave a presentation to. Do you want to? Because I think that feeds into where we're going here with the strong women thing.
It does, but what I was just going to say is that you are very girly and you have a lot of quote unquote feminine traits, but then you also have this really strong masculine drive and ambition and desire and logic and
super ambitious. Like I love to work. Yeah.
And all of that, exists within the same person whose gender is female. And, I don't know much about your private life, but, a person like you, I'm sure you've conquered this, but a person like you or other women in your position, your challenge in life is going to be learning when to turn the dial up and when to turn the dial down.
Yeah.
And there was a time in my life before we get to the lawyer thing where.
Sorry, I'm laughing, but that's so spot on about me.
Oh, okay.
When to turn it up and when to turn it down. Yeah.
Right. So just because you have a high level of masculine or feminine energy doesn't mean that you can't control it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Some people are born with a high level of neuroticism or anxiety or depression or whatever, still have to learn how to control that. You can't just say, oh, this is the way that I was born, so, it is the way it is. And there was a time in my life where I was having absolutely no success with women. I couldn't get a date. I kept getting rejected, and it's because my feminine energy was shooting through the roof. It was coming out of my pores. I was so emotional. I didn't have my stuff together. I didn't have drive. I didn't have a purpose in this world. I didn't know, what I was meant to do. I was constantly overthinking. I was constantly anxious. All of these things that are typically more feminine traits, they were very, very pronounced in me at the time, and I wasn't harnessing any of my masculinity. So no women were interested in me, And now, thankfully, it's the opposite. I still have a lot of tenderness and sensitivity, and I'm still an emotional creature, which is why I'm able to connect with women very well. But now I'm in very strong control of both of these energies that I have. And I know when to harness them, and that's what's allowed me to be successful with women romantically, while also being successful with them in my professional life. And the way that I approach women professionally versus on a date are two completely different approaches because they require harnessing different energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I'm grateful that you brought that up. It's,
which leads directly into the.
Yes. Okay. So that is a dance. If you're a little bit more of a feisty, strong-willed something or other that I happen to be, and all the women in my family, I think this is where intuition leads. And I think this is where you stay heart-based, because there's a time to speak and there's a time to be silent. There's a time, and it is a dance. It really is just moving through a flow state of when you need to just stop and be in that feminine energy and just listen and observe and receive, versus I need to act. I need to speak up. I need to move. And for me, I have times where those are integrated so powerfully. And then I have other times where I'm still learning this, as I think most of us are. But I can see it very well in others. It's just that I'm so close to it myself, and I'm also mindful that I get triggered when somebody is in a certain energetic state. We'll just say maybe they are embodying a frequency, or there's just a sleep to it or whatever, because it's triggering that response in me of I haven't healed this aspect of integration. And so by them being really strict in the gender roles, or not listening to me, or whatever it might be, like we'll just say the patriarchy as an example of this ideological way, right? It's triggering all of us. The patriarchy in terms of, this matrix of white male dominance, let's just say, in systems and constructs. So I find myself like, why would this trigger me? Maybe it's my own relationship to flawed authority in myself, or maybe there's some aspect that this is really not necessarily just about that. It's this unhealed, unhealthy masculine in me.
Exactly.
That seeks to dominate or whatever.
Right. And that's exactly why I said at the very beginning of the episode that we can talk about society, the patriarchy, the social constructs, the matrix all day long. but those things exist for better or worse, for better and worse, right? And at a certain point, it's Cherie's duty, instead of, turning her nose up at that and living in a state of frustration and anger about the way the government is or whatever, it's Cherie's duty to decide, how she wants to outgrow that. You're not responsible for the influences that you absorb before the age of like 15 or 16. You don't have any control over them,
Yeah.
But once you become 18, 20, 22, 25, you start thinking for yourself. You get to, decide for yourself which influences you want to believe in and emulate, and which things you agree with and which things you don't. And if you see that something is really, really angering you, something is constantly triggering you, you have probably no control to change that thing, like something like the patriarchy, for example. But you do have control over your relationship to it. And then so some people will spend their entire lives trying to take it head on and take it down, whatever that it is. And, that's worthy. But to me, that's living in a state of constantly being triggered and being angry.
And it doesn't really change the societal construct.
Exactly.
You can't fight anger with anger and expect it to shift. Yeah.
Right.
So let's talk about these women that you gave this presentation to, and what came up and what you learned, what they learned.
Okay. So this was a one-time thing. I haven't been asked to do it since. Actually, that's not true. I have been asked to do another one, but basically, one time I gave a talk, and during that talk, I was talking about these concepts: masculine energy, feminine energy, the dance and the roles between men and women, not gender roles, but, the things that we embody and the way that we interact and communicate with each other, a lot of conflict management. And somebody raised this young woman, 26, successful lawyer, raised her hand and she asked a question. And the question was, why do men, when they hear that I'm an attorney, why is it that they won't touch me with a 10-foot pole? Why will they always run in the opposite direction? And, you could substitute attorney for like any high-powered career position. There are a lot of men who want attorneys, doctors, engineers, CEOs, rich women, but the majority of men, I don't know how it is where you live, but at least where I'm from in Los Angeles, when they hear that a woman is in a really high-powered executive role, they get turned off, and it's intimidated is not the right word. It's not intimidation. But for various reasons, which we can go into, they say, okay, I don't want to date somebody like that. So she was asking me this question, and I gave actually an 8-minute answer so I was talking for 8 minutes straight. And I told her the 3 reasons why this happens. And after that, I got approached by, I don't know, like 40 or 50 women in the audience after the Q&A, who said, like, you need to talk more about this. This is like a huge problem that we have. We're the whole package. We went to school, we're educated, we make money. Like, we're not expecting the guy to be a multi-gajillionaire, but we don't want to be chronically single just because we're in a high-powered position.
Right.
So then I did a talk with about 50 or 60 women. I want to say like 90% of them were lawyers. The rest of them were like high-powered executives in marketing, advertising, medical field, very prestigious positions. And
all of them were female as well.
All of them female, no guys allowed at this one. And, maybe 98% of them were single. Mm-hmm. And, the handful of them who weren't single were there because they were having a problem in their relationship or in their marriage. Mm. And, there's the question of why are men turned off by this, which is a slightly different question.
Do you think it's that they're turned off or threatened somehow with their masculine energy?
I don't think they're threatened. I'll explain that in a second. So there's that question, but again, starting with the self, not starting with the other person. Mm-hmm. The first question that comes up is, how do we handle this? Because this is a thing. right? I'm sure a lot of your female listeners who are in high powered roles have experienced this. And the main takeaway is, again, what I was saying before, learning how to harness and when to harness your masculine versus your feminine energy.
So the timing of that dance we were just talking about, basically.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So what I often tell my clients is, whatever moment you are in, stop and ask yourself, what would be the fullest gift I can give in this moment? So if you're a doctor, you're an emergency room doctor, and shit is hitting the fan, excuse my language.
You're okay.
Okay. And you got to manage the whole team of doctors and nurses, and you got to do an, operation, performing surgery and saving someone's life. The fullest gift you can give in that moment is hunkering down, getting it done, saving the lives, managing the people, all this like very masculine energy. But when you get home that night to your husband and your children, what is the fullest gift you can give? The fullest gift you can give is nurturing, loving, giving attention, giving affection, mothering your children, taking care of your husband, right? And what's the fullest gift that he can give to you in that moment? Protecting you, providing for you, seeing if you need anything, making you laugh, reducing your stress, etc. A lot of people, will bring the energy of work or friendships or family into their romantic relationship.
Especially like in the case of my husband and I, we've been married 27 years, is that we do work. A lot of our business, we have a business together, basically. I mean, it's largely mine, but he stepped into, so it's hard to delineate, and like go out to dinner on a date night and we're talking about business. Like, wait. No.
Right. So I'm glad you're aware of that, because at dinner, for you, Cherie, to be immersed in the fullest giving of your gift, he doesn't want to hear your business advice at dinner.
Right.
He wants you to be his girl. You know what I'm saying? And that's the fullest gift you can give him.
Yeah.
Now,
it is about attention, don't you think? Like, what we're really talking about is just mindfulness and paying attention to whatever situation we're in and what it calls for. That's actually feminine. I mean, it requires a feminine, to be in a feminine place, whether you're male or female, of noticing. Right.
Yeah. And, if you're a lawyer and you're a litigator and you're trying to settle this case for, $1 million or something like that, you obviously got into that line of work and into that position because you have the ability to bring that energy. But then, as you said, you struggled with a couple of times in the past. You have to know when to turn that down.
Not just a couple times.
Okay, maybe every day.
Yeah. It's a challenge. I can get very dialed down and focused on something. Yeah.
Okay. So it's amazing that you have 6 kids and you have, a husband who loves you and a happy, healthy marriage, presumably, and all of that kind of stuff. But most people, like most women like you who have the mind you do, are not fortunate enough to be in that position. Most of them are chronically single. These are my clients, and we get them unsingle, and I've gotten them, over the last 3 years, I've worked with 97 women, all of them between the ages of 28 and 38. And all of them were single when they came to me. 91 of them are now married, engaged, or in a happy relationship.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. But this is a real thing. When women are in the position that you are in, it's really hard for them a lot of the time to find love. And again, part of that is because of not, adequately choreographing the dance between their energies. But then, of course, there's the other piece of this puzzle, which is the partner. Let's presume it's a man, and let's presume that man has masculine energy. Okay. He's not threatened or intimidated. The thing that I always hear is, if I make a lot of money, his ego is hurt.
Yeah.
It's not about his ego. And it's, and he's not threatened most of the time. Once in a while, I'm sure you've got someone who's threatened. It's about three things. First of all, men need to be needed. We are natural protectors, providers, and caretakers. So when I get the sense from you that you have everything down pat on your own,
what do you need me for?
Exactly. What do you need me for? So now this may be a faulty assumption on my end, because just because you got $1 million in the bank doesn't mean you don't need me, right? But men are very logical. So they say, she's got a good job, she's got good friends, she's got $1 million in the bank. The hell does she need me for? Maybe what I need to hear from you is, I have a good job and I've created a good life for myself, but I don't want to do this on my own. There's nothing I would love more than to take off Fridays and wear yoga pants and bring lunch to your office. Like, I dream of being able to do that. Right. When I hear that from a woman, I don't care if she's a lawyer, a doctor, a Harvard professor. I know that even though she has this amazing career, she still needs me.
Yeah. So right? Define need.
Need is that I fulfill a role in her life that she cannot fulfill by herself.
Got it.
Need isn't a desperate need like codependent.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I was, because I think women carry this wound of not, like, I just have to share this with you. My mom had this book called Fascinating Womanhood back in the 70s when I was growing up. And it was this whole book, 300 pages on how to act like the damsel in distress, basically. How to play, like, if you have an opinion, don't do this. And if you're like, pretend like basically like carry a mouse in your pocket and throw it on the ground and act scared so that you'll need his protect, like that level of fake, really. So I can see where this author was going with it. Like, it's kind of what you're saying, but the old paradigm was to not be authentic.
Yeah, I don't agree with not being authentic. I don't agree with carry a mouse in your pocket and act scared. But
I would genuinely be scared of that. So,
I mean, I would be scared if I had a mouse in my pocket. I wouldn't have to act scared because I don't like bugs and creepy crawly things. But it's 100% about being authentic. If you are the type of person who does need a man, meaning he can fulfill a role in my life that I can't fulfill by myself, you need to tell him that.
Right.
If you're the type of person who really thinks I'm better on my own and I don't need him for anything, then don't bring him on. You're the captain of the ship. Don't bring him on.
Yeah. If there isn't, and I do believe this is why certain souls are led to each other, because they may not, like when I met my husband almost 28 years ago, like I didn't know logically that we would complete this learning for each other. But I do think people are attracted to each other for their shadow sides and their light sides and how they can help each other heal. It's about becoming more conscious more than it is, I need you to be happy. But I know that's not what you're saying. You're saying, hey, this person literally, I have such a blind spot on this part of myself that I cannot heal this without this person, or I can't, let's just say, be fulfilled necessarily and without the role that this other person plays to help me see what I can't see, number one, exactly. And the happiness factor of that, or the wholeness factor of that.
Right. So when I say that men need to be needed, it's not for the satisfaction of their ego. It's because they're hardwired to give. They're hardwired to take care. So, your husband needs you to need him, because if you can do everything by yourself, he's not fulfilling his purpose in your life. And the masculine is a very, very purpose-driven energy. And look, if we take this out of male, female, like, you know, a lesbian couple or a gay couple or a trans couple, whatever, it really doesn't matter. You know, there's usually one person who has that purpose driven, let me take care of you, let me provide. And then another person who is in more of a receiving and supporting role, regardless of what the gender is.
Yeah.
The person in the providing role needs to know that the person in the receiving role actually wants to receive and wants to be provided for. So men make the wrongful assumption that when they see a high-powered woman, she doesn't need him. And that's the turnoff.
Yeah, I can see that.
So that's the first thing.
The first one, yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So the second one, we already kind of covered when we talked about the masculine, feminine energy, but men hate being bossed around. This is kind of simple. There's nothing a man hates more than being criticized, bossed around, or emasculated. And they, again, make the assumption, sometimes true, sometimes false, that if they're dating a lawyer, she's going to be bossy. And I'm so sorry. I know that whoever's listening to me thinks that I sound like a dick. I mean this in the most loving way. It's just how men think. Yeah. They just think, I'm not justifying it, but when they meet a high-powered female executive, they often worry that she's going to be bossy, and they hate that. So the solution to this is don't be bossy.
Well, women have that same fear of being criticized, coached, controlled. Yeah. That the control piece is because we are physically less strong. I'll just say, I mean, emotionally, we are very strong. Physically, we have some vulnerabilities.
Sure. So yeah, that's a great point. So the way that a man feels safe in the relationship is that you're not bossing him or criticizing him. The way that a woman feels safe in the relationship is that you let her be free and you're not controlling her. Right. So we each have these wounds and, you know, we have to be aware of the other person's pain points and not press them so that we can create safety in the relationship.
Perfect. Okay. And then what is our third one?
Okay. So, number 3 is actually an evolutionary concept. I don't know if you've talked about it on the show before, but it's called hypergamy and hypogamy.
Oh, no, I have not heard that.
Okay. So this one is less about masculine, feminine energy, and it's more just like one of those realities, like it's more of a logistical problem that's difficult. So evolutionarily, women like to date across and up hierarchies of socioeconomic status. Perfect example would be that a female nurse would rather date a doctor than a guy who works at 7-Eleven.
Okay. Yeah.
Men, so that's called being hypergamous. Men are hypogamous most of the time in nature. They date hypogamously, which means that they date across and down hierarchies of socioeconomic status.
Like the pecking order. Yeah, right. Like the socioeconomic.
Right. So a male nurse would rather date a nurse or a school teacher than a female doctor. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, here's the issue. The higher you go in the pecking order, the fewer available candidates there are for you. So if you're a female nurse who makes $80K a year, you've got a lot of options of men who are in high positions who are making over $100K a year. If you're a female lawyer who's making $300K a year, you've got fewer options of men who are at or above your level because there are just fewer people in society who make $300K a year or more.
Sure.
There are just fewer brain surgeons than there are people who work at 7-Eleven. It's a numbers problem. But women still like to date hypergamously. They still want to date across and up, which is why a lot of them are single, well into their 30s and 40s, because there are just fewer options. Right. So, at that point, you either have to get lucky that, you know, you found somebody who does not care about how much money you make or what your job is or whatever. He cares about the person that you are, and that's the ideal situation, right? Or you have to be okay with dating down, right? Dating somebody who is at or below your level, or you've got to make some other change. Now, these are not hard and fast rules, and there are exceptions to everything. You know, and again, it's not about male, female. It's about the energy within each person.
Right. So do you think that we're going to kind of evolve past this hierarchical, to where we could be more accepting of
not in my
gender
lifetime.
roles being kind of fluid that way?
Not in my lifetime. I don't believe we will, because a lot of this is our evolutionary hardwiring. And as a society, we have tried to outsmart our evolutionary development. My hope is that we will develop a more sophisticated and emotionally attuned and nuanced understanding of our masculine and feminine energies and how those exist within the individual. And with that understanding, then yes, our roles can become more fluid, and we can be more accepting and more tolerant and have fewer of these constraints. But if you're asking me if I think that as humans, we're going to evolve out of, you know, these patterns, I don't think so. I think that in my lifetime, at least, these patterns are here to stay, and it's going to be our job to work with them and dance around them. Right.
Yeah. And a lot of, you know, as we kind of wrap up with this, because I know you have to go, a lot of this has, what we're talking about, what kind of makes it a little more complex is trauma.
My God.
You know, inherited trauma, as well as, you know, situational trauma. So it does make it less defined in terms of, you know, that inhibits the flow of these energies. And then the social conditioning on top of that can be traumatic. So we're all just kind of doing the best we can, right? What I love about relationships is they do teach us and show us the unhealed parts of us, and they help us become more conscious if we're in it for the right, you know, reasons, and we're humbling ourselves and things to be heard and seen. So I love your perspective. I love everything that you shared. I'm grateful that there's men like you who are sharing the complexities of these energies, that they're not so clear cut, that, you know, and every situation is so different, and every person and every, we can't lump things into these gender, you know.
And look, you know, when I point out these realities about the way a lot of men feel or a lot of women feel, you know, when I talk about the challenges that we have to contend with, my ultimate mission is to help every person find love and find purpose. You know, I never say these things as a gotcha. Like, hey guys, women want to be protected, so better make sure you got a lot of money in your bank account. Like that's a stupid thing to say. You know, I hate that perspective. Or like, hey girls, better not be a lawyer because guys don't like it. That's dumb. That's immature. Yeah. Right. It's about understanding what are the constraints and challenges that we have to deal with as members of the opposite sex, with varying energies, masculine and feminine, and existing within this society. What are those realities, and how do we make the best of them? How do we work with them so that we can all find love and purpose and fulfillment in this world?
And we have to be ourselves, you know. We can't hold back our energy just because there's a smaller dating pool.
Of course. And you don't have a choice. Even if you tried not to be yourself, you would
after a couple of weeks. It's going to seep out at some point, right? Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. How can we find you online? Where do you want our listeners to go?
Yeah. My website, kevinnahai.com, or my Instagram, which is just Kevin Nahai. My last name is Nahai. And you can send me a message through my website or my Instagram. And if, you know, any of your listeners, I'd be happy to hop on, a 10, 15-minute phone call with them and just get to know them and say thank you for tuning in.
Perfect. Well, you have a wealth of knowledge and information to share. And so, I'll have all that in the show notes. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
I really appreciated this discussion, just to be reminded that both women and men need to be needed. But I would say, after talking with Kevin and listening to a lot of other males that I greatly admire, very conscious males, men have a stronger need to be needed in the ways that they serve. They're hardwired to give, as Kevin mentioned. They're hardwired to take care, protect, all those things. The masculine is a very, very purpose-driven energy. You ladies listening, your purpose-driven energy that moves you to action is part of your masculine energy. It's what you exert, it's your will force. It's how you throw your passion out into the world in a service capacity, a mission-driven capacity. We have these, forces within us that seek to be integrated, seek to have harmony, seek also to be harnessed so that they can be used to their fullest capacity. I think it can be really affirming to learn how you perceive, emote, believe, give, receive. All of those are points of power and portals into your own calling and mission and gifts and talent landscape. I have a lot of favorite tests and assessment that I have learned a lot about, like the Strengths Finder test. That's been huge for me. The Gene Keys and Human Design, those are both super deep, super powerful ways to get to know how you're wired and built and how you give and receive love and how that works into your path. Those are just a few of my favorites. I really love exploring uniqueness and diversity. We're not supposed to be homogenized little robots. We each have a soul, and our soul is orienting us towards certain preferences and perceptions so that we can fulfill a mission and purpose that only we can fulfill. So again, have a glorious week, and we'll talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.